Welcome back to another Kentucky Derby profile here on Racing Rundown. Today we're going to be discussing Un Ojo, the winner of the Rebel Stakes from this year, and one of the really feel-good horses going into this Kentucky Derby. I'll get into some of his races. We're not going to watch every single one of his races because there are a couple of them that aren't really relevant. If we take a look at what he's done over the course of his career, excuse me for not having the Equibase in the right place. 7 career starts, 2 victories, and 2 runner-up efforts. He made his career debut on October 9th at Keeneland, and you can see right there, it didn't really go too well for him. He broke last, had some trouble at the start. I just think he wasn't really ready for that start. We'll go on to his second career start now, which was a maiden race going 6 furlongs at Delta Downs, and it actually, interestingly enough, was on Future Stars Friday. And you see him right there. He's currently last at this point in the race, and but he's right now beginning to pick up these horses, and he's rather wide in here, so you can tell at least right now that's definitely a positive for him, widest of all at this point. And he's going to go by these leaders and win rather impressively. Again, this is Delta Down, so you ask the question of, yeah, well, who is he really beating? And that's definitely a fair question when it comes into this regard. But, certainly something that you can look at and say, yeah, at least he has something there. Also skipping over his third career start, which was a black type at Delta Downs. Again, I don't really think there's too much to draw from that start. You can take a look at the chart right here. Once again, coming from last in that race, and didn't really leave that strong of an impression there. We're going to move on now to his his fourth career start, the second replay of his that we're going to look at, and that is a New York bred stake, because he's a New York bred, on December 18th at Aqueduct going 7 furlongs. And he's going to run a little bit different in this race than he did in a couple of his subsequent starts. And he's not quite going to come from absolutely last in this race. And that's one of the things I think about Un Ojo that's interesting. I'll get into it more when we get to the Rebel, but you think of this horse traditionally as a dead closer. This horse isn't necessarily I don't think that that's necessarily when he's at his best. However, I do think that's what he's going to have to do in the Derby, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. Right now, he's just sitting a good mid-pack trip right here, probably closer to the back than mid-pack, but for lack of a better term, sitting a decent mid-pack trip here. Once again, he's wide, and that's something that he's not going to have to deal with in his couple races down in Arkansas, but at least at this point, he's wide in here. And he's beginning to sort of move up toward these horses, but the 6th horse, Gino, is eventually the horse who's going to win this race, and Gino's getting first run on Un Ojo right now at this point. Now he's not quite getting a perfect rail trip, but he's not as wide as he was in the earlier part of this race, and he's going to have to shift out there to hit that hole, and as I mentioned, Gino's got first run on him, but now it looks like Un Ojo at this point it may get to Gino at this point. I'm actually not timing this. Right now is the point where it looks like he might get to Gino at this point. But then Gino digs in and holds off Un Ojo, who loses this race by about a half a length here at the end. So good first impression in stakes company. They didn't give him another start until February of 2022, his first start of 2022, and that was the Withers Stakes. And we're going to skip through a majority of this race because he's back to dead closing here, and he's really not in the picture at all. Right now is actually when he's coming into the picture in this race. You've probably seen before with this race, his early voting is powerhousing this group right now, alone on the lead. But Un Ojo is actually beginning to make a pretty decent move at this point in the race. He is wide at this point. Now he's going to split horses, find the hole between Grantham and Courvoisier there, and that's going to be what allows him to get up to finish second in this race. No catching early voting, but this left a good impression, at least looking back on it in retrospect. Initially, everything was bad about this race. The figure was bad. It looked bad visually, but with the benefit of hindsight, this was actually a very credible runner-up effort behind a very good horse in early voting. Now we're going to get on to the biggest career day of Un Ojo's, and that was, of course, the Rebel Stakes at Oaklawn. This was going a mile and a 16th, and this is a lot different than anything that he's done up to this point because the dead closer mold with him is kind of shattered with this race. He gets a good early position here, breaks well, and he had some trouble with that, as you remember, from the earlier part of his career. So he gets a good break and gets a really nice rail trip. And the difference here is Ramon Vasquez is actually going to put him in the game early. And this race makes me wonder whether or not Unojo is actually a horse who may do his running better the forwardly placed than further back in the race. He has had success dead closing, but you'll see with this race that he also has the benefit of being able to be forwardly placed, and he's right up there with these horses. He's not up there with Kavad, the leader, but right up there with Chasing Time, pretty close to the position where Newgrange is in this race, and he's going to get even closer to the leader, Kavad, at this point. They're not going overly fast here in this race, and Unojo is, like I mentioned, getting that perfect rail trip right there. He's in front of most of the closers right now, and this race is right now setting up really well for him. As I mentioned, Kavad's just going along rather easily. Newgrange is he's outside of Newgrange. Newgrange is outside of him. He's about to get to the point where Unojo is going to run by both the leader and Newgrange. But Ethereal Road right here, the Dwayne Lucas horse in the blue cap, looks like he's going to run a really strong race here. And then Unojo kind of at this point seemingly hits the wall, and you think he might be done here. But mid-stretch, he's going to re-rally. Now, I will say, I think that this is a very ugly-looking race. But at this point, Unojo kind of swimming good. Then he finds himself. Right now, at about this point, he gets back into the game, gets back in front of Ethereal Road. He punches his ticket to the Kentucky Derby with this. A good runner-up effort from Ethereal Road here. But this race, very, very ugly race. It did not look well. It did not look very good visually. And I'm not really sure that I like anyone too much from it, but you do have to give Unojo the credit. It looked like he was kind of swimming mid-stretch, and he was able to rally and get by the leader, Ethereal Road, mid-stretch. Now getting to the Arkansas Derby, this is a race where just about everything goes wrong for Unojo in here. Doesn't have a bad start, and the difference with this race and the Rebel is he's not going to be able to go up there because there's 5 horses that all are up there pressing for the lead early. They're all faster than him. Unojo doesn't have a reason to try to go up there, and he also doesn't have the speed to go up there. So Ramon Vasquez is going to do the same thing that he did in the Rebel, find the rail trip, and they're a little bit spread out now. This field is going to bunch up really fast, and it's going to be the 3 leaders, Cyberknife, and then everybody else who are all the stalkers/closers there. You see right there. They're all bunched up. He's inside of all of them right now, and they're actually going to get up to Cyberknife, and now it's 2 bunches, and that's when Cyberknife is going to make his move up to kind of get back into where the leaders are. But very compact group of horses right now at this point, and Unojo sitting that good rail trip. The unfortunate thing for him is this rail trip is what's gonna do him in because of how compact the field is. Unojo is gonna eventually get slammed into the rail. He got pretty cut up by that. He had to get staples afterwards. So it's I'm not gonna say it's remarkable that he's here for the Kentucky Derby, but it was in doubt whether or not he was gonna make the Kentucky Derby. And you see right now at about this point he's gonna hit the rail and pull up there at this point. He didn't pull up, he finished the race, but his race is over at this point. We're going to stop watching the replay at this point because there's not really any more that we can draw from that. So, getting to Unojo, the pros and the cons for him. The pros, he had been placing well in races before the Arkansas Derby, and obviously had won the Rebel, but had the 2 stakes placings at Aqueduct. Had the good maiden score in his maiden effort at Delta Downs. So he had shown an ability to be able to finish well. Obviously, getting to that Arkansas Derby, the major excuse there, getting slammed into the rail. I don't know that he was going to run in the top 4 or anything like that in the Arkansas Derby, but he definitely would have finished better than he did in the Arkansas Derby. So that race is just pretty much a wash. You can just absolutely toss out the Arkansas Derby. And then the Rebel. I know I said the Rebel was a very ugly looking race, and I don't have a lot of positives for it, but he did win the race, so that is not a bad thing. Winning a Kentucky Derby prep, 50-point Kentucky Derby prep is certainly not a negative for a horse. The cons, though, the figures are very low. That 80, by the way, is from the Wither Stakes, and if you remember, we talked about it with early voting. That figure initially came back much worse for early voting. It was a 78 for him. I'm not sure what the figure was for Unojo. I can't go back and archive that, and I didn't record it at the time, but it was up to an 80 still, even after being up to an 80, still not very good, but definitely was much worse initially. In an 84 to win the Rebel, that's not really anything overly impressive. And then obviously you can toss out the Arkansas Derby figure, but still, overall, figure's not really that good. He's also just a slow horse. I said I feel that he might be a horse that could do his running better mid-pack, but he's not going to get to a mid-pack area in the Kentucky Derby because half the field wants to sit that mid-pack trip, and I guarantee you 80% of that half of the field is faster than Unoho. So Unoho is probably going to be uh, relegated to dead closing in the Kentucky Derby. And he has a hard time passing horses. If you saw in the Rebel and in his in the New York Bred Stakes, I don't remember what that race was called, but New York Bred Stakes, it looked like he had an issue passing horses down the stretch. He took a while to get by Ethereal Road. And obviously, as I mentioned, I'm not crazy about anything about the Rebel. I did put it as a pro because Unoho did win the race, but not really anything that I'm overly impressed by it. So Unoho is not a win candidate for the Kentucky Derby. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that I think he can win the Kentucky Derby. What I think he can do is I think he can be one of those horses that at huge odds hits the board. I look for those horses every single year. He's a horse. The price is definitely going to be there with him. His fellow Arkansas Kentucky Derby Trail horse, Barber Road, has been getting a lot of talk, and Barber Road's going to take a lot more money than Unoho is. And if you like Barber Road, I encourage you to take a look at Unoho because Unoho finished in front of him in their one fair start against each other. But that's about all that I could say positive for Unoho. He could hit the board if they go nuclear enough on the front end of the Kentucky Derby. And with that being mentioned, that's it for this Kentucky Derby profile. We will see you for our subsequent Kentucky Derby profiles. There is the playlist down below in the description, so you can check that out and take a look at some of our other Kentucky Derby profiles. In the meantime, we will see you for those subsequent profiles, and we'll see you next time on Racing Rundown. Have a good one.